our webinars and some new names. So let me start by just going through what we're going to do from a format point of view, and then we'll kick off. I'm going to spend the first sort of 5-10 minutes just giving an update on what we're seeing in terms of performance for different brands and how marketing's working or not working, as a case may be. And for those of you that have joined us previously, we've obviously shared a lot of insight around the impact of COVID on different brands and different sectors going forward. And then I'm going to hand over to Sandy, who's going to run most of today's session. And Sandy's a retail and consumer trend spotter and strategist, and I'll give her a much more thorough introduction when we come to that part of this webinar. And we'll keep some minutes at the end for Q&A, and I'll just invite people to unmute themselves and go for it effectively in terms of what they're doing. So in terms of a quick update from some of the things that we're seeing, for those of you that have joined us previously, we've shared a lot of data about brands that have been impacted by COVID, or brands that have been doing very well because of COVID. And what we've started to see over the last 2 or 3 weeks is a gradual sort of shift in patterns of consumer behavior and reactions to marketing. And some of the really consistent things that we were seeing a few weeks ago about certain sectors doing very poorly, like fashion, and other sectors like skincare or food doing very, very well, have started to kind of, it's the right way of putting it, those differences have started to minimize a little bit. So the sectors that we've seen do very, very well throughout March and April and early May are still performing well, but the levels of growth are starting to drop off. So where you might have been, if you were one of those brands that was up 100%, in April, you're finding that you're closer to 50 or 60% up. If you're one of those generally that was down by 30 or 40%, you are now close to minus 20%. And I think there are a few things that we've seen that have been really quite interesting in terms of what that looks like from a behavior point of view. So for the brands that have continued to do well, particularly when I look at things like skincare, the initial sort of period was all about hygiene and hygiene related factors and looking for products that helped you with hygiene in that sort of environment. That's much more changed now, where the demand for those things, although it's still up, has declined slightly, but actually people are looking to do things that treat themselves at home a bit more effectively. So what you're seeing is that although performance is still very good, the mix of products being sold is very different. The data we're seeing from Amazon in particular is showing that the COVID-19 essentials sort of categories are starting to decline in growth, and everything else is starting to come back a little bit more strongly. What we have seen evidence of is for a lot of brands, they obviously stopped or slowed down the amount they were spending in various channels. Those that have remained more active and gone back onto social a bit more heavily over the last few weeks tend to be the ones that have performed better. There's been a real contrast in looking at discounting strategies versus spend, and actually those that have relied very heavily on discounting, very much retargeting their existing customers through brand paid search or email, have generally fared much poorer than those that have been a bit more active from an external marketing point of view and actually have discounted a little less heavily. So it's been a very interesting sort of take to kind of understand how people are trying to manage margin either via discount or via spend. Actually, at the moment, what we would say is that we're seeing across the board is those that have been a bit more aggressive about spending, particularly via social, and discounting a little bit less, have been much more successful than those that have been much more direct in terms of their promotional strategy and their marketing strategy from an overall point of view. The sectors that were really impacted positively, like office furniture and things around the home to improve your life short term, some of the consumer electronic segments have really dropped off quite quickly as that demand has almost been catered for. People have bought what they wanted to buy, and you're seeing much more reduced levels of activity in that sort of space. But what I would say is there are a couple of things that are definitely worth starting to look at. Number one, for those of you that work with Google and work with Google AdWords, you should find that Google have given you free money in all of your accounts based on what you spent last year to incentivize you to come back. If we don't do that work for you, I would suggest you talk to whoever does, because it has an expiry date on when you can use it. So they're obviously trying to incentivize people to go back into the market and start spending a little bit. And the second thing I would really say for those brands that are struggling is take a really hard look at what you're doing from a social media point of view, and where to invest. Rates are still very, very low because a lot of money has been sucked out in the segment. And short-term opportunity-wise, you are likely to find that if you can get the creative treatment and the process right, you are going to do disproportionately better than a very, very heavily discounted all-on promotional strategy piece. That's really it from me today. I'm going to introduce Sandy, who is very kindly joined us today and going to take over. Sandy has a really interesting background. So she now runs her own business, which really helps brands understand the psychology between human behavior and kind of how they behave in store, and designing much more human-centric brand strategies and experiences. She's done that for a litany of big brands over the last couple of years, including Tesco, Farfetch, John Lewis, Jo Malone, Arcadia, Adidas, and a number of others. Prior to that, she spent 15 years at Accenture as a strategy consultant, helping clients in areas of innovation, CX, and store the future design, and working very, very heavily in the retail and consumer goods parts as well as with startups. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Sandy, who I'm sure we are all very excited to hear from.
Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. And thank you for inviting me to join you on today's call. So what I'm going to do is share my screen. So what I want to walk through are just some of the retail observations from the openings this week. As we know, many non-essential retailers have started to open their doors. We've been eagerly awaiting, as well, I have at least, as a shopper and obviously a follower of the industry. So I'm excited to share some of the things I've been observing from both my in-person visits as well as talks with my colleagues as well that have been out exploring different areas. So let me get this to work. 1 second. It says I'm disabled with the screen sharing. That's right.
That working, Sandy? You should be able to just hit the share screen button.
It just says host disabled attendee screen sharing. Sorry about that.
Sorry. Okay, try now.
All right.
Excellent.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, this, although that's a man there, but this describes me at least right now, where I'm starting to re-emerge from my home bubble, as many other people are as well. We've obviously had some of restrictions lifted over the last few weeks, but I think more and more people are emerging from the home bubble, trying to explore some of the new experiences that are open. And as with anything, I like to start with the human and with the consumer and where their mindset is at the moment. So as they're re-emerging from the bubble, sorry. As they're re-emerging from the bubble, they're also thinking about shopping quite differently. So it's really redefining what shopping means to them. So as they're making the decision of whether to even visit a retailer, it's really now, there's just a lot more investment required. And they're asking themselves questions like, is this going to be worth it? So one of the additional investments obviously is time. So we're seeing longer waits, not knowing if there will be a queue. Some items may not be even accessible because they have to be quarantined for 72 hours or whatever time frame the retailer is defining, as well as the actual length and journey to get there. So whether that's walking, cycling, and those brave enough to take public transport as well, or if they have a car. So thinking about that, and then as well as additional time to research. So you're thinking about what's my plan ahead of time. What will be the new rules for each retailer, what I can and can't do, what things do I need to bring with me? So whether that's a mask, gloves, even planning things like access to a toilet, right? It's just even those simple things, because not many toilets are actually open in the retailers or restaurants. And then one other thing is just this emotional, mental energy. So many of us still have high anxiety levels, and we're building up the courage to actually go through the baby steps to go back to normality. And let alone obviously the big risk to our health and safety. So with the queues and things like that, you may be worried about competing with people to get inside the store. There may be obviously heightened levels of aggression perhaps. You're worrying about what others will do actually inside the store. Will they observe social distancing rules, and not being able to predict what other people will do? So that's going to be top of mind, as well as I think what's different now as well is that you probably have a mission-driven, I guess, purpose, right? So you're going to be shopping for a reason. I think there will be some segment people that maybe view it as entertainment, as just an activity to get back to their normal lives, but most people will have something in mind in terms of what they want to buy. So maybe it's already having a list, or even just thinking about having done a lot of research online ahead of time. And there's probably highly likely from a retailer's point of view, high commitment to actually buy something. So there's intention to buy, given that you've had to invest all of this like time and energy and research once you're actually in the store. So this week, I don't know how many of you actually have gone out, but I guess if you haven't, and you probably read the news and seen articles or videos of what it was like, and you may have seen pictures like this of this long queue. And this picture is not from this current week, but it's about our relationship with queues in the past, and how retailers have used them as a part of their overall experience. So in the past, how we viewed queues, right, is around, let's say, a brand like Supreme, where they've actually had this long queue because it's all about the drop and getting that exclusive product, the whole experience of even being there with others, your friends, and actually getting to be like the first person and the only person, right, to have this small amount of stock and this new shoe or whatever was dropped that week. As well as I guess queues are also a part of the luxury experience and that exclusivity and something quite special and personalized. So for example, here, there's a picture of outside of the shop Goyard. I don't know if any of you have actually been there, but when my family was visiting last summer, they were desperate to go and get a bag from there. And we waited in the line for, I think it was an hour and a half or 2 hours. I would never have done that unless they were visiting, but they really wanted to get that experience. And the line was so long, and we finally got inside, and it's actually a one-on-one type of session. And so obviously there's high levels of intent to buy because you've actually waited there, and you're getting that really special product that not many people have. So it's actually worth it to you to be there. So now fast forward to today and what queues mean. So what we've seen now is this picture of at least what they've shown in the press, right, is these massive queues in front of Nike, actually quite in close proximity to each other. So it doesn't look very appealing to actually be there. As well as we saw Primark as well, and other retailers have this just on the first day. And even in Bicester Village, which is in the lower left corner, there was even a petition put out around the safety of that and trying to get Bicester to either shut down the stores or to come up with some new guidelines to be able to increase the distance between people. So I think the question now has moved from, is this actually an overall experience I want to be in, to something that, is this queue actually safe? Is this even convenient for me going forward to be waiting there every time I go to the store? And is it worth it for me? So these are just kind of the shift in mindset for people as we think about this week. So we saw these queues, right? But what's the reality? So I was out on the second day in that similar street where we saw Nike and Primark, and there were definitely no queues. It's I guess more about the first day and you wanted to be the first in line, the first person to go back, and this pent up demand to have those experiences. And in reality, most people are waiting for milestones in their head of what I guess actually has to happen before they actually return to the store. So we're actually seeing people quite nervous to return. So out of a survey, nearly 3/4 of Brits taken last week did not plan to visit physical stores due to their health and safety concerns. We actually saw, while footfall obviously has increased since last week, but year on year, it's actually down 50% overall. And for the West End, it actually translates to something quite tangible. And unfortunately, it's probably going to be about $5 billion or £5 billion lost in sales this year. That could equate to 50,000 jobs lost. So not that rosy of a picture, unfortunately. And I guess what I've observed as well is that safety measures are stressed for all the retailers that have opened, obviously through the signage, through the employee communications, just through things on, obviously, the markers across the pavement and as you enter the store. So safety is definitely the prominent message, yet inconsistently applied because you don't know the rules specifically for each retailer. So whether sometimes you see employees wearing masks, sometimes not, you don't know what you have to bring in, or actually if you have to wear a mask, so things like that are confusing for the shopper. And actually what I have not liked is that the message is all around what we can't do. So around what we're losing as a part of the experience. So whether that's here, this is from Boots, right, that we can't actually test products. So beauty products can't be tested or sampled. So you're not able to actually get the whole experience. And even just, why would you even go to the physical store if you can't test anything or touch anything? Because you can actually easily buy it online. And this is also on the right, it's just around that you're not able to touch any or sit down anywhere. So that was a struggle that I found when I was around the shops during the day. There's nowhere to actually sit unless you go perhaps to a park or to a bench, things like that, because you can actually rest. So that's this no touching thing is actually a huge factor and does add something negative to the experience, unfortunately. But it's not all doom and gloom. I want to highlight, I think, some of the great examples I saw, and actually identify opportunities for what retailers can do to improve the experience. So one of the standouts, which is not surprising, is from Selfridges. So I think what is great about it is that it's an overall mood boosting, spirit lifting type of experience, even from the moment you approach the store. So you have, I don't know if you can actually hear it, but there's entertainment outside. So playing, in this case, music outside to entertain as you approach the store. There's also just uplifting messages across all of the store windows. So things like thanking the NHS, and messages like, thank you for brightening our day. Thank you for helping me look ahead. And it's just all around the store. So it's already an uplifting message. And just all of these welcome back types of signage, which I loved. And also, even as you enter the store, it's just like these small gifts to thank you for coming. So here in this case, they had a bottle of water that day. I know when they opened up the food hall, they were giving away flowers, and they actually had, which I thought was great in terms of their approach, is that they first started with the food hall a few weeks ago to get some, one, I guess, just to reconnect with the community, but also to test, right, to see how many people would come back, and how they had to adjust any kind of procedures and processes as they opened up further. The other thing that I thought was great in Selfridges was that they've redesigned their offerings to serve the new needs of the COVID consumer. So one of the things, obviously ahead of time, you can pre-book an appointment with a stylist before or after opening hours. So it's one way to have that really personal experience, as well as being able to book virtual appointments for beauty services So in case you're still having trepidation about going back to the physical store, you can still have that Selfridges experience with some of the beauticians and things, and have that over video instead. And the other thing is that they're still on top of trends in terms of what matters to us as consumers, so, and how our habits have changed. So obviously we're not dining out, we're cooking at home, we're having picnics and things. So they've created bundles around alfresco dining and have that available in hampers that you can buy, as well as staying on top of trends like CBD and wellness products. And as well as our need to consume less. So they partnered and have her and Vestiaire, so you're able to rent looks instead of having to purchase more items. So again, very relevant to some of the trends. So the other thing that I thought is interesting is that some are reimagining every touch point. So especially when things have been closed. So using the opportunity of something like a store window to be a point to connect with passerby or the shopper as well, if they don't actually want to go inside. So the example here is from Lone Design Club. So they have a bunch of independent brands. They've been hosting pop-ups that are themed every month prior to the lockdown. And so in this case, they wanted to reconnect with their community, but do it in a safe way. So they had the looks available in the store window that you're able to see, scan, and buy, and support independent brands. There's another example here. If you want to actually book a test drive, you're able to do that by scanning the window as well. And then also one that was actually, when I launched a pop-up a few years ago, it was starting to initially have some interest, but didn't fully take off. And I think right now is really the time for it. It's here in the lower left. It's called Economy. And so it's basically the theme I was exploring when I launched the pop-up was imagine if the window came to life. So here you can basically, as you're passing by, the beacons trigger your phone to have a message. And if you want to actually buy the look that's styled on the mannequin, you can do so with just by the tap of a button. So all of these ways to continue to engage with the shopper are going to be, I think, rise more and more, especially in our contactless world. So the other things I've loved about this time is that many of us have started to rediscover our local community. So the butcher, the cheesemonger, the independent brands that have stayed open throughout the time and who've helped us along the way. So I think at this time, people are going to remember all of our local independents that were still there for us during this time and how they made us feel. So one of them, this is not from an opening this week because they've been open the whole entire time, is one called Notting Hill Fish Shop. So they have this one location, and as COVID hit, they were worried about what they were going to do. Obviously, they have a small store, and they were worried about being able to stay open and how they would continue to serve the community. So they quickly, in just a couple of weeks' time, quickly went online and created a whole new business and partnered with a cheesemonger, a butcher, fresh vegetable, fruit and vegetable, a bakery, all combining together to create this e-commerce offering. All within a couple of weeks, and now are serving all of a lot of parts of London, and they're able to deliver within the same day, and actually have turned some of this into good for the community. So they've actually had chefs that were not able to be employed by restaurants because they're shut. They come in, they cook meals. So they also create content for their social media channels in the store. And then they also create meals that will get sent to NHS and frontline workers. So it's really just such a great story about the local community and one around, I know it's just an overused word around pivoting, but it really is that kind of story. And I love that. And I think we're going to see more and more of those independent brands start to come to life, especially as we're not able to go out of our areas. So one other story is Made.com in terms of their opening in Paris I don't know if it was last week or the week before. What they've done around nurturing their own community, because they do have and partner with a lot of independent brands, but also influencers. So as a part of their opening strategy, they had They invited influencers, one each day, to come in and be a part of the experience, and actually create content around that, and just include them as well. So it's continuing to nurture those relationships, especially as they opened up. And I think what this time has I think the stories, I guess, that have resonated with me is the ability to use the employees, even if they're at a distance, to have still that personal touch with the customer. And especially these employees, they have so much knowledge about the products, about the brand, and they really are great ambassadors, as even during the COVID lockdown. So one such example here on the left is through a company called Go in Store, and they were actually in my pilot as well a few years ago, and I'm glad that they have now started to have such take up of their product, given everyone's in lockdown. But what Go in Store does is they provide that video connection with your employees in store to customers through your website, through apps and such. So they're able to have that video and very personal connection to get advice. So, for example, now bicycle and cycling has taken up tremendously, given we're not as mobile. So in this case, Brompton and Ribble as well have started to use Go in Store to be able to connect and give that advice as people were deciding what bike to buy. And then the right, Curry's is also using Go in Store, but I think what is also great about them and Dixon's overall is that in their opening, they thought about what customers would need right now and how their needs have changed. And so right now, obviously, we're working from home. We probably have a lot of devices. Maybe they need repairs and things. So in the first couple of days of opening, they had people come in and they could bring any device they had, and created tech hubs within the stores themselves. So thinking about what we would need right now, as well as places to maybe old devices that we needed recycling. They also created that, they offered that service as well. And I think another thing is we're going to be thinking about, do we need all of these stores, right? And are there stores that we can convert into formats that have a better function for what customers need at the moment? So what Starbucks actually has done is they've announced that they are going to convert many of their stores into just pickup only types of formats. So here's one that they launched in November. The one that they currently have, and the one and only pickup only format in New York, near Penn Station. So they basically want to create things like this. So it's obviously very little contact. You order ahead, and you just come in and collect your coffee that you've pre-ordered and paid for. And while obviously click and collect and services like that are going to continue to rise, especially as people are buying things online, and for those that actually want to go and collect it. But it doesn't have to be quite as functional or boring. We have to think about what can we do in these spaces to actually still connect with the customer, have it create a purpose for them to even go there, because right now it's just much easier to just get deliveries. So if you actually want to still have that connection point, and still have something that is aligned with your brand, you have to rethink what this fulfillment experience will be. And so one great example is it's called Box in Helsinki. And so essentially you can go in and collect your packages. Obviously you see on the upper left with these lockers. You can also unbox it then and there. So you open it, you're able to try on and they have a fitting room there. They have actually areas there that you can partner with local brands to have merchandise on display as well. So if you want to buy something else, as well as return items then and there. So it's just such a different view around fulfillment that it's just such a great example. I think this would be something great for retailers to test out here in London. And lastly, I think we're going to see tech have its moment in the sun. I didn't see as much visible in my experiences this week, but I think more and more this is the time to pilot and test and work with some of these more nimble tech players that can help you do things faster and have insights more readily available. So for example, here on the right, you're able to, especially to understand the occupancy, how many people have come in and out of your store, and just getting that information no matter where you are. So I think there are so many players right now out there that can help you do that in terms of in-store analytics. And as well as thinking about how tech can help as you innovate your store format as well. So in this case on the left, this is actually Gucci. And it's similar to Go in Store. It's obviously a video connection here. But what's different about it is that it's not a store. It's actually a place they've used to create content. So it essentially looks like a store. It has all of their products, but it's actually staff using their time and share their expertise and answer questions from the customers directly into some of these studios, or they have been converted into this type of format. So I just want to, I guess, some closing thoughts. Those are just some examples of what I've seen this week. But I think what's critical is that really this is an existential moment for retailers and brands. I think it's such an important time to reevaluate your brand purpose and really answer the question of what is the purpose behind my brand? Does it still matter to customers? Because our needs have changed, our habits have changed. And really understanding and empathizing with customers is going to be so critical at a moment like this. Because what do we need now as shoppers? Are we still selling relevant products and services for our customers' changing needs? And also think about your store estate and the formats you have. Obviously, we're going to see many reduce the store estate, but thinking about what do you do with that space that's remaining? What is really the purpose of your store? Why are customers coming to this location versus buying online? And what's going to be their mindset at the moment? Are they going to be nervous, excited, and how can you adapt your services and train your employees to be able to serve those needs if people are kind of nervous at the moment? And then are we creating an experience across all the touch points that's going to entice them to return? Because if that first moment when they return is a negative one, it's going to take many, many more positive interactions to reverse that first negative impression. And are you really using employees to the best of our ability, as well as protecting them? So are they being empowered? They have amazing knowledge. Are we using that at this moment? And so we're going to see also just opportunities, as I mentioned, in some of these examples that are going to emerge out of a crisis. So whether that's more personalized services, new formats, the ability to pilot and scale at speed to become more agile. And really this local love, I think, is going to continue to be a trend as we're not traveling as much and really having a newfound appreciation for our local community. So with that, I think just open it up for questions. Stop sharing.
Does anyone have a question they want to ask, or I'm happy to go first if there is no one? I've got a couple. Okay, I will go first then. How do you think, from what you've seen in terms of what's starting to happen with retail from an offline perspective, the role of online has to change, and how brands and companies have traditionally viewed online to what they will need to do with online from a consumer experience point of view in the future?
Well, I think one of the things is that it's no longer, I mean, it never was, but it's still even more so now, is that it's not viewed as a separate experience. You have to think about it as an extension of your brand. It's just another touch point. So they're going to just continue to be merged more and more. So that has implications, obviously, from the front end customer experience, but also thinking about your supply chain and can it meet that and support that as well. I mean, online is still going to continue to grow, I would say, as we are staying at home and having more and more goods delivered to our home. I think it's going to be even more critical to think about what your digital and e-commerce strategy is as a brand. And so those that don't have it, I think it's going to be critical to build it now. And I think, again, just that consistency of your brand experience across all the touch points is going to be so important.
Great. And my second question was, from some of the particularly sort of social media and media commentary around stores opening and people queuing, there was a very demographic or classist element to some of the commentary that was going on earlier this week. I just wanted to get an understanding if you think that the impact of the changes that are going to affect different demographics or different age groups very differently in terms of their likelihood to go back to store or long-term changes in what their behavior actually looks like.
Yes. So, so I guess my observation, I haven't seen any demographic breakdown per se of studies that have been done in terms of research. It's just more anecdotal from what I've seen and in conversations I've had. I think initially the people that were queuing were, I would say, skew younger. So a younger demographic. They, I guess, don't view it as risky an activity as perhaps older age groups, and as well as some of these, I guess, locations of retailers is going to exclude certain people. So I think thinking about a family, if you have young children, you're not going to be going to places where you don't know if you have access to somewhere to change a baby, or you won't have access to food, or restaurants are not really open, there's nowhere to sit. So I think naturally this is going to exclude some people as well as the vulnerable and older population.
Great. Does anyone else have a question? I have one last one after this.
I mean, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to have your video.
I guess one thing. Hi, it's Hannah from 3Pack. What impact do you think this is going to have on Q4 and Q4 shopping, and how do we plan for that? If we can plan.
I mean, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think it's difficult to plan. What I've seen is having scenarios ready. So having a plan in place for an optimistic one, a base case, and one where there's a second wave, or if we never leave the first wave. So I think it's really planning for those scenarios and then working backwards from that. Unfortunately, this level of uncertainty is going to be around for at least end of year, definitely, I would say. But again, I don't know the answer. I wish I did.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Thank you.
Okay.
I would say too that there's, I'm happy to share this as well because I'm a part of these ongoing discussions with Shop Talk. They're in the US, but they have been having these global calls every week where we update and share different scenarios across different things like consumer trends, retailer trends, supply chain, and then as well as financial forecasts, and what that means for different scenarios and how you should plan. Happy to share the link to that because it's an ongoing framework that we're working on.
That'd be great, thank you. I've got one final question if there's no one else, and it's slightly broader. Obviously, there are a number of retailers suffering before whatever's happened has happened. If you have to sort of look slightly longer term and take not just the context of what's happened, but the retail industry in general, what are your thoughts about what fundamentally needs to change for those businesses to become successful again in the long term?
Yeah, so I think in the long term, I mean, it kind of goes back to how I closed it, right? Is really identifying what your reason for being is and whether it's still going to be relevant to what's important to us as consumers. So, and if it doesn't make any sense anymore, then redefine it. But I think that's going to be number one. And then just from a financial stability standpoint, I think the ones that will be in the middle will, I think, unfortunately, we're going to see some restructuring there of many retailers dying out in the middle. And I think we're going to see more and more of luxury and value, especially in the short term. We want to have less money as a whole, as a country. So people will be looking for more affordable luxury and looking for value. And we're going to probably see downward pressure on some items over time. So I think that's going to just, the financial considerations will be important to consider. And then re-looking at your store estate. And again, what I said about the purpose of the store. I think it's going to change for a while, because with no contact, what's the purpose of going there? So we're looking at your store estate, which ones can be closed, and how do you actually create experiences worth going for and worth investing your time? I think it's still going to be important.
Right. There's just one extra question that's come through on chat. I'll just read it out. If you're a retailer that relies on browsing, e.g. DVDs, books, how can you deliver this at all offline?
Like, sorry, DVDs?
So if you're relying on browsing behavior, so I have a particular thing for books, as it's probably in the background. And
yeah.
I don't think I would ever go into a store, not pick up a book, read the back of the cover to decide whether I wanted to buy or not before putting it down. So where that kind of touching or browsing or interacting with the product is so intrinsic to that behavior, how can you do that in this environment? Is there a way around it?
Yeah, so I think the no touching thing is, again, it's been like applied differently retailer to retailer. So I know Waterstones have said they're going to quarantine books for 72 hours if you touch it. Others, when I was in my experiences this week, no one said don't pick anything up. So it's not going to be consistently applied. So, and we're going to learn more and more, I guess, if you actually need the 72 hours. But in the interim, I think you can use technology in a way. So what Lush is doing, obviously Lush is a very experiential type of experience, very immersive, where you're testing and picking things up, smelling things. They've had to remove that from their experience, but they're actually promoting their Lush Lens app. So what that does is that you are still able to scan the soap or shampoo or whatever it is and get the information about it on your phone through augmented reality. And they're just investing more in the tech aspect until you're able to touch products again.
Right. Okay, one other one. Do you have any insights on travel retail? As airports start reopening, how would domestic trends impact travel retail shopping?
Sorry, I'm just looking at the question. Domestic trends impact travel retail shopping. So I think I don't know. I don't know that much about which ones have reopened in terms of travel retailers, but I would imagine you would have to continue to stay close to which things are opening. And I would think the ones that have actually opened have done quite well. I forget if it's some stats I've been seeing in Asia that actually has done well in terms of beauty and things like that. But I apologize that I don't know that much about the travel retail sector.
Okay, great. I think that might be everyone. So thank you very much for joining us. A really insightful conversation, and thank you everyone else for joining us too. Just to give you an update on our next call, which is on the 30th at 11, we will be joined by Peter Higgins, who was one of the co-founders of Charles Tyrwhitt, and has served previously as a chairman of Cathkids, and is currently the chairman of Me&M, which is a fast-growing retailer. So if that's something that you think will be interesting for you, please let Jack know, and he will put you on the list. But otherwise, thank you, Sandy, again for joining us and giving us some really insightful chat this morning, and thanks to everyone else. And we will say goodbye.